Today's podcast will be on Bolivia and Bolivia's revolution. First, we're going to start off with a brief history of Bolivia as a whole. Bolivia is a country in South America. Has neighboring countries of Brazil, Paraguay, Peru. It's right above Argentina and right next to Chile. The geography of Bolivia is pretty unique. Bolivia is one of South America's landlocked countries. The other country that's also landlocked in the country is Paraguay. Being that it's a landlocked country, it plays a considerable part of the country's development, and it really affects Bolivia as far as its development. It's with either it being economically, socially, or agriculturally, and it comes to show that a position of a country and it's put in the world or wherever it's very, very, very significant. The population of Bolivia is roughly about 10.5 million. The citizens of Bolivia is predominantly of indigenous origin, meaning they're native to the lands. Not a lot of Europeans came over and settled there and started their own cultures and things in Bolivia. The indigenous citizens of Bolivia, mostly of the Mestizo, the Quechua, and the Amura. There's also there's a domination, or I guess you would say other citizens that live there. There's also the population of whites, but the Amura people consist of about 25% of the population, while the Quechua people is about 30%, and the Mestizo people is about 30% of the population. Whites, they contribute about 12% of the population, and the others is where about 3% of the population. Like I mentioned before, Bolivia is one of the Latin American countries that doesn't have a lot of European, cultures and influences like other countries like Brazil having Portugal's influence, speaking Portuguese. Bolivia, is a Spanish-speaking country, but didn't really have Spanish influence like you would say in Argentina or Venezuela or Peru, and those countries that are well known for European cultures. Bolivia is made up of many resources like tin, zinc, silver, lead, and gold. These resources are what makes the country run. It's what brings revenue, capital to the country, and it's very, very plays a significant role. There's other minerals, precious stones, semi-precious stones that can be found in Bolivia as well. You have marble, granite, you have topaz, you have emeralds, and you have Pizarra, Yetzos, you can be found there, salt, copper, calcite. You have natural gas that can be found there. These are all the main sources of revenue for the country, and very useful resources that can be utilized in the country and worldwide. And it would go to shape and provide means for the future of Bolivia. But with these resources, it led to the exploitation of its people. The resources themselves got exploited by being used in, you know, a way that doesn't benefit the country. It's in the national revolutionary movement is an effect of these exploitations. The MNR is National Revolutionary Movement was an effect of the poor, the peasants, just falling victim to the elites and their stronghold on the resources, or, you know, their stronghold of exploiting the workers that work their lands. And it would lead to, you know, the Bolivian, revolution, and, you know, and then you have leaders like Victor Paz stepping up to, you know, fight for the lower class people and, you know, provide an ideology to be followed for the betterment of the country. Victor Paz, you know, he wanted to bring, you know, a different view to the country. He knows firsthand because he was a landowner himself, and, you know, he really understood the economics, and he wanted to bring that experience to the country for the betterment. And he believed in, you know, the future for the country. He also believed in trying to use democratization to instill this. But, you know, not all his views were, you know, forthcoming, you can say. But, you know, the National Revolutionary Movement was a way of changing things in Bolivia. It would give the country a new identity, you know, and it would stand up for all the industries and like mining and, you know, the workers itself. The purpose of the revolution, you could say, is, you know, it was trying to overcome poverty. It was trying to bring the lower class people up. It was, you know, a way of people standing up for what for their rights. They wanted to, you know, get better as a people, and, you know, sometimes it's just you have to revolt for that to happen. And, you know, with the revolutionary movement, you know, and Victor Paz, you know, being a leader of it, you know, he brought his populist ideology. And, you know, the populist ideology was all about giving or having the lower class people fighting against the elites for, you know, stop the inequality of, you know, the classes. You know, they had a right to prosper and, you know, excel in life as well, not just the elites being elite. You know, sometimes it's better to have more than one class because there's just such a big gap, and it really plays a part on the advancement of the country. Reform was demanded. I mean, that's the purpose of the Bolivian Revolution. It wanted to change the oppressive conditions of the peasants, poor people. It wanted to stop the oppressive conditions against, you know, workers like the miners or any other of the combined workforces of Bolivia. It wanted to. Its purpose was to stop oppressive behaviors, you know, coming down from people of the elite status, you know, and the reform is needed for, you know, the peasants to get something, you know, get land, you know, utilize it in the proper way, you know, give back to the country, and instead of having people like Mr. Patino who was a big mining owner, and using all the money that was being made from these mines and not even invested in the country, he would take his money elsewhere, and that doesn't benefit the country at all. And this reform was needed, it was demanded by the people for the betterment, and it was justified. The MNR, it had its successes. It wanted to, better working conditions. It wanted to have, unions, to protect the workers, and this was necessary. It was workers giving, a script of what they want to be, good citizens, and for their country to take care of them. And in '52, when Paz becomes president, the MNR has a successful revolt. Its revolt was based on introducing new land reforms, being able to divide it out. The revolt in the MNR, they wanted to have universal adult suffrage, established. They wanted to, nationalize industries like tin, for example, like I mentioned, so that the people could benefit from it. And, it was just something that, was inevitable. The revolution was inevitable because the people, had enough of being mistreated. With the revolution, you had organizations like the COB started, which is the Bolivian Worker Center, and they were set up for basically the trade union for workers, and they looked out for all combining workers in whatever field it may have been in. It was set up to really give the workers a voice, and and like the problem with the COB had to keep dealing with is they had to deal with Bolivian presidents that they just couldn't work together with to get what was needed for the citizens, workers. And the COB believed that the resources should be nationalized and be used for the benefit of Bolivia, not just the rich trying to fill their pockets. They believed that, and the COB was set up to provide consultation to workers and just represent them in general. And the COB now has about over 2 million Bolivian workers in that that they represent and look out for. And like the COB, the Union Federation of Bolivian Mine Workers was organized, the FSTMB, which is a mining unit, and they were set up and work along with the COB and their labor union as well, but in the interest of the Bolivian mines. The Bolivian mines is a significant entity of the country. Their mining industry brings in a lot of revenue. It's capital that the country needs, and they needed a union to represent these workers so that they're not, exploited like they had been in the past. So the FSTMB was another, organization that evolved from the revolution, the Bolivian Revolution, and it was very, very necessary to play a part in the working class of Bolivian society. you know, like I mentioned before, you know, the FSTMB, you know, was one of the main staples that came out of the revolution in Bolivia. They really became a strong adversary, and they stood up to the government, the military, and they were absolutely necessary. And they proved that, you know, that if they can come together, they can stop the oppressive behaviors being held towards miners and workers, period. And you know, the miners would end up, you know, coming together. You know, as many as 60,000 became members of the FSTMB, and you know, that's a significant number. And the numbers like that, you know, played a role in, you know, confronting the military, because the military throughout Bolivian's history is always the part, or I guess you would say the entity that would be the ones to step in and bring some kind of order to the country when failed leaders, you know, were removed. And so the military, you know, had an adversary, had someone that would stand up to them and know that, hey, and that they're there, and they won't be pushed around by the military either. Just like they wouldn't be pushed around by, you know, the elites or, you know, whoever was in charge as far as presidential wise. But with the FSTMB, you know, there would be struggles for them as well, just like, you know, any other organization. The FSTMB struggles was basically on, you know, on what side of issues they needed to be in. And when I say sides, is it would end up dividing the union on who was pro, you know, government, you know, the union playing a part in the government's policy makings, you know, the politics of the country. While, you know, some parts of the union were about, you know, keeping the workers and, you know, work out of politics. They shouldn't be mixed. There shouldn't be any. There shouldn't be. It should be two separate entities, pretty much, is that from some part of the union official members. So it would end up dividing the union, you know, pro-government or pro, you know, just no government in working issues. And that, you know, that would become a struggle as well. But it was a necessary struggle, because it came to bring light, you would say, to, you know, for successful companies, unions, or anything like that, that sometimes it's in the best interest that you don't be in the government's issues, because it'll dictate the way your company is run, or you should just be a worker and work. You know, it was all subject to interpretation, or, you know, whichever way people, you know, felt about it. But, you know, it's based upon the history of Bolivia as a whole. You can understand why people would want to play a role in government or not play a role. You know, and it would lead to, you know, a stalemate, because people were torn, you know, pulling on each side, and it just goes back to showing how, you know, how unstable Bolivia is as a country. But the revolution was still necessary, because people were not getting what they want. The workers, the citizens, they weren't getting what they want. And the only way your voice can be heard at times is to result, unfortunately. So, you know, in the end of the line, you know, the bottom line, the FSTMB work with the government, and, you know, they end up, I guess you would say, finding a common ground to where they can, you know, have some influence on government issues, policies, and things of that sort. But, it still makes it hard on, whoever was elected official to, to govern the country, because they always had, have the unions and, looking over their shoulders, wondering if they're going to approve or disapprove or whatever he wants to get across. And so it's just, something that was just not working for Bolivia, but yet necessary, because it could always been worse, but it could always be better. In summary, what I like to share is that Bolivia is a country a Latin American country at that, with many struggles, and their struggles stem from, whether it be its population, its people conflicting, the workers, and its resources being used in the wrong manners, but overall, the Bolivian Revolution, it was something that was inevitable, because it had to happen for people to stand up for what they believe in, their rights, and getting their voice heard. But in the same sense, it's a little futile, I guess you would say, because it's just like, is it really necessary? Because it's the country's still in chaos. There's still no stability. But it's just one of those things that it is what it is. But as far as the revolution goes, it was necessary, because they have gained in the process, and it wasn't for nothing. And to support some of the work that I've presented, I've used, books like The Concise History of Bolivia. It's a good read. The author is Herbert S. Klein. It has a very, very good side and view of the history of Bolivia and its revolutions. And another book that was very useful was Bolivia, the Land of Struggles. It's a plain book, but it's a good read as well, and it tells about the struggles of the land, and the things that the country went through. The author is Waltrid Morales. Good book. Also recommended. And another book that it doesn't really touch on a lot of Bolivia as a whole, but the Latin American theme of revolutions, and that's Born in the Blood and Fire, which is a good book as well, by John Charles Chaston. It doesn't go in depth on the Bolivian Revolution. It does touch on it, but it does give a common factor for Latin America and its revolutions. And they're all good reads and very informative. So with that, my name is Doug Williams, and this concludes my podcast.